The story of the 1979 Roosevelt dime is not just the story of a small 10-cent coin. It is a window into American history, culture, politics, and economics. At the end of the turbulent 1970s and the beginning of a new decade, the dime itself might seem ordinary to many people today, something that has passed through countless hands at grocery stores, gas stations, and vending machines. But when we take a closer look at the 1979 dime, we uncover a rich history that connects us to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to the struggles of World War II, to the advances in minting technology, and to the dramatic changes in the American economy during the late 20th century. To understand the significance of the 1979 dime, we first have to understand why Franklin Roosevelt appeared on the dime in the first place. Roosevelt, who led the nation through the Great Depression and World War II, was a symbol of resilience and leadership. He had also been stricken with polio, and his image became linked with the March of Dimes campaign that sought to raise money to fight infantile paralysis. So when Roosevelt died in 1945, the United States Mint decided to honor him on the dime, which had become associated with the cause that he supported. This, designed by John R. Sinek, featured Roosevelt facing left with the inscriptions, "Liberty in God, we trust," the date, and the designer's initials. JS. This design replaced the winged Liberty Head dime, commonly known as the Mercury dime, and it has been in use ever since. By 1979, the Roosevelt dime had already been circulating for over 3 decades. But the coins of this year are fascinating for several reasons. First, we have to consider the broader economic backdrop. The 1970s were a decade marked by inflation, oil crises, and debates about the strength of the U.S. dollar. Americans were increasingly concerned with the cost of living, and the dime itself was a symbol of the shrinking purchasing power of money. Something that could buy more in the 1950s and 1960s was worth far less by 1979, yet the dime still carried the face of Roosevelt, a reminder of leadership and stability in uncertain times. The mint itself was also in a period of transition. During the 1970s, new technologies in coin production were being implemented, and errors, varieties, and changes in mint marks became points of interest for collectors. For the 1979 dime, production took place at several facilities, including Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Each of these mints played a role in striking millions of dimes, but it is the San Francisco mint coins that have drawn the most collector attention, because 1979 was an important year for proof coinage. The 1979 S-proof. Roosevelt dimes are especially notable. Because of the mint mark varieties, collectors know these as Type 1 and Type 2S mint marks. In 1979, the San Francisco Mint changed the style of the S mint mark, leading to 2 distinct versions. The Type 1 mint mark looked more like a blob, or was less defined, while the Type 2 mint mark was clearer with sharper serifs. This small change created a divide in the market, and today the Type 2 versions command premiums among collectors, especially in higher grades. This represents one of the many subtle details that makes the 1979 dime more than just pocket change. It is a case study in how even the tiniest alterations in minting can create long-term value. Looking at the composition of the coin, the 1979 dime, like all Roosevelt dimes, struck since 1965, was made of a copper-nickel-clad composition with an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core. The removal of silver from the dime had taken place in 1965, when rising silver prices forced the government to switch to base metals. This change reflected broader economic forces, and by 1979, it was well established that the dime was no longer a precious metal coin, but a circulation coin designed for durability and efficiency. Still, collectors often marvel at high-grade examples, especially those with strong strikes and minimal wear, because finding perfectly preserved copper-nickel-clad coins from circulation is no easy task. In terms of mintage numbers, the Philadelphia Mint struck hundreds of millions of dimes in 1979 with no mint mark. The Denver Mint also struck a huge number with the D Mint mark, while San Francisco produced proof coins. The sheer quantity means that circulated 1979 dimes are common, but what sets them apart are condition, rarity, and variety. When a collector finds a coin graded MS-67 or higher, it becomes a prized piece, because clad coins often suffer from weak strikes, poor luster and contact marks in circulation, similarly proof coins with deep cameo contrast, and flawless surfaces can carry strong premiums. But the 1979 dime story does not end with mintage numbers. It also connects with the numismatic culture of the era during the late 1970s and early 1980s. Coin collecting in America was gaining popularity, fueled by silver prices, bullion markets, and a growing awareness of coin varieties. Collectors began to look more carefully at details like mint marks, die varieties, and proof types. The 1979 S Type 1 and Type 2 dimes became part of this growing movement of error and variety hunting that still defines the hobby today. It was no longer just about having one example of each date and mint mark. It was about appreciating the subtle differences that told the story of how coins were made. Furthermore, the 1979 dime holds significance because it sits on the edge of the transition between two eras of American coinage. On one hand, it belongs to the traditional Roosevelt dime series that stretches back to 1946. On the other hand, it anticipates the technological improvements and heightened collector awareness of the 1980s and beyond. In this way, the coin is both a product of its time and a bridge to the future of numismatics. When we hold a 1979 dime today, we hold a piece of history that represents the economic struggles of its time, the enduring legacy of Franklin Roosevelt, the technological changes in minting, and the collector culture that continues to thrive. The coin might seem small and ordinary, but every scratch, every shine, every mint mark tells a part of the American story. So whether you are a seasoned numismatist or someone who has just pulled a 1979 dime from pocket change, this coin invites you to look deeper into the history of America's coinage, to appreciate not only its face value but the historical journey it represents from the Great Depression to the inflationary 1970s, from the fight against polio to the fight for financial stability, and from the ordinary minting press to the extraordinary passion of collectors. Join me on this deep dive to uncover the stories, the mistakes, and the value that could turn an ordinary coin into a once-in-a-lifetime find. The story of the 1981 dime begins in an era when the United States Mint was striving to maintain the tradition of the Roosevelt dime, first introduced in 1946. This iconic design, bearing the portrait of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, has been in circulation for decades and represents the legacy of a man who led the nation through the Great Depression. And World War II, the 1980 dime, is part of that legacy. And yet it has its own unique place in American numismatic history. Minted at 3 different facilities, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, the 1980 dime is instantly recognizable by its mint mark, or lack thereof. The Philadelphia Mint did not use a mint mark on its dimes until 1980, when they began adding the P Mint mark to the Susan B. Anthony dollar, but not yet to the dime. So the Philadelphia dimes of 1980 bear no mint mark. The Denver Mint marked its coins with a small d, and the San Francisco Mint produced proof coins with the S Mint mark. But what makes the 1980 dime so intriguing is not just its place in the Roosevelt series, but the potential for rare varieties and mint errors that drive collectors wild across the nation. Coin roll hunters and collectors sift through thousands of dimes, hoping to discover that one coin with a dramatic off-center, strike a double die obverse, or reverse a broad strike, or even a rare transitional error. The most sought-after 1980 dime varieties include double die obverse examples where the inscriptions like "Liberty in God We Trust" or the date shows signs of doubling, which can drastically increase a coin's value to hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on the strength of the doubling and the condition of the coin. Another rarity involves off-center strikes, where the coin is not properly aligned during striking, resulting in a coin that appears dramatically shifted with missing design elements. These can be worth significant premiums, especially when the date remains fully visible. Broad strikes are another popular mint error involving coins struck without the collar that normally holds the coin in place during the striking process. This results in a wider, flatter coin with expanded rims. Planche errors also captivate collectors, such as the wrong planche error, where a dime is mistakenly struck on a planche intended for another denomination. These errors are extremely rare, but when discovered, they become instant highlights of any coin collection. Imagine finding a 1980 dime struck on a copper cent planche or even a foreign coin blank. These unusual mistakes tell a story of human error and the complexity of high-speed coin production that has fascinated numismatists for centuries. But the history of the 1980 dime is not limited to errors and varieties alone. Its production numbers and the economic context of the time also matter. In 1980, inflation was high, and the economy was in transition. Coins like the dime remained vital for daily transactions. Yet, as silver content had been removed from dimes starting in 1965, the 1980 dime is composed of a clad sandwich of copper and nickel, giving it a silvery appearance without the intrinsic silver value of earlier dimes. Still, condition rarity plays a huge role in modern coin collecting. While circulated 1980 dimes may only be worth face value, high-grade uncirculated examples, especially those graded MS-67 or higher by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, can fetch impressive prices. At auction, collectors look for coins with full bands on the torch, a designation that indicates strong details and a crisp strike. Full-band dimes are highly desirable because they show that the dies used to strike the coin were fresh and well-maintained with clear separation in the horizontal bands of the torch. This small detail can make the difference between a coin worth face value and one commanding a premium. The San Francisco proof dimes of 1980 also hold a special place for collectors. Proofs are specially struck with polished dies and planches to create a mirror-like finish and deep frosted devices. The 1980 S proof dime was included in annual proof sets sold to collectors, and while most are common finding, one in perfect PR70 condition is a challenge. Any minor imperfection can drop its grade and value considerably, so collectors seek out cameo and deep cameo examples which have strong contrast between the frosted design and the mirrored background. These coins often reside in protective slabs, ensuring their preservation for future generations. Another aspect that cannot be overlooked is the cultural impact of the Roosevelt dime. It is a symbol of a nation recovering from crisis. It commemorates Roosevelt's leadership and his role in founding the March of Dimes, an organization dedicated to fighting polio. The dime itself stands as a daily reminder of how coinage connects us to history. Every time you find a 1980 dime in your change, you hold a piece of that story. But the hunt for rare coins also connects generations. Families pass down coin albums. Children learn the thrill of the search and the satisfaction of discovering a hidden gem in everyday pocket change. The 1980 dime has inspired countless new collectors to begin their journey into numismatics. The story does not end here, though. Because every year new varieties and errors are discovered, coin experts debate the origins of certain anomalies, re-examine old collections, and submit coins for regrading or new attribution. This constant evolution of knowledge keeps the hobby vibrant and the market alive. Prices fluctuate with demand, rarity, and condition auctions bring surprises as bidders compete fiercely for the finest known examples, and headlines are made when a seemingly ordinary dime sells for hundreds or thousands of dollars, turning a piece of pocket change into a legendary find. The 1981 dime represents this thrilling possibility. The next time you check your spare change, look closely, examine the date. the mint mark, the details of Roosevelt's profile, and the bands on the torch under magnification. You might be surprised at what you find. Maybe you will discover a double die, a broad strike, or a rare off-center that turns your routine day into a treasure hunt. So keep your eyes open, your magnifier ready, and your mind curious. The history of the 1980 dime is still being written by collectors like you. Every coin tells a story, and your story could be the next great find in the world of rare American coins. Keep searching, keep learning, and remember, the rarest treasures often hide in plain sight, in the jingle of coins in your pocket, in the rolls you get from the bank, and in the history we all share as coin collectors and stewards of the past. That is the legacy of the 1981 dime. And its story continues every time a collector finds that one rare coin that changes everything forever. In the long and fascinating story of American coinage, the Roosevelt dime occupies a place that combines historical reverence, economic necessity, and numismatic curiosity. And when we turn our attention to the 1985 dime, we uncover a coin that at first glance seems common, ordinary, and overlooked, yet when examined closely, reveals layers of history, design decisions, minting practices, and collecting significance that stretch across decades of American history and into the present day. To truly understand the 1985 dime, we must begin with the origin of the Roosevelt dime itself, because the design we see on the 1985 issue is not new to that year. It traces back to 1946, when the United States Mint introduced the dime honoring President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who had passed away in April 1945. Roosevelt was not only a four-term president who guided the nation through the Great Depression and most of World War II, but he was also a central figure in the March of Dimes campaign to fight polio, the disease that afflicted him for much of his life, and ultimately linked his name forever to the dime coin, which became the perfect tribute to his leadership and humanitarian efforts. The dime design was created by chief engraver John R. Sinnock, whose initials JS can be found at the base of Roosevelt's neck on the obverse. His portrait shows Roosevelt facing left, a simple, strong, and straightforward rendering that was praised for its dignity, though it also stirred some initial controversy, as Sinnock had been accused incorrectly of copying his design from a sculptor named Selma Burke. On the reverse, the Torch of Liberty, flanked by an olive branch on the left and an oak branch on the right, became the symbol of freedom, peace, and strength. And this design has endured largely unchanged from 1946 through the 1985 coin, and indeed to the present day. Now turning specifically to 1985, the United States Mint was producing dimes in two primary locations, the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint, while the San Francisco Mint focused on proof coinage for collectors. And when examining the mintage numbers, we find that over 1 billion dimes were struck at Philadelphia in 1985, carrying no mint mark, and nearly 1.2 billion were produced at Denver, bearing the familiar D mint mark, while San Francisco produced more than 3 million proof dimes with the S mint mark. These production totals highlight one important fact about the 1985 dime in circulation. It is by no means rare in terms of sheer numbers. And for most people in the mid-1980s, these dimes were simply pocket change used in everyday transactions. But from a historical perspective, each coin serves as a time capsule reflecting the economic and social climate of 1985. This was a year when Ronald Reagan was president, when the Cold War still defined global politics, when the United States was experiencing both technological change and cultural transformation. And yet in every cash register, pocket and purse, the Roosevelt dime continued to play its quiet role as a reliable piece of money worth 10 cents, yet representing decades of continuity for coin collectors. However, the 1985 dime holds interest not just in its general circulation role, but in its condition varieties and errors. And this is where numismatic history becomes essential, because though billions were made, only a fraction survive. In pristine mint state condition, untouched by wear or circulation coins graded at MS-65 or higher begin to command collector attention, while those in MS-67 or MS-68 become significantly more valuable given their scarcity in such perfect condition. The story also includes the fact that since 1965, Roosevelt dimes have been composed not of silver as they were from 1946 through 1964, but of a clad composition consisting of a copper core sandwiched between layers of copper nickel. This change was implemented because of the Coinage Act of 1965, which removed silver from dimes and quarters due to rising silver prices and concerns about shortages. So by the time we arrive at 1985, the clad composition was well established, meaning the intrinsic metal value of the dime was far less than its face value, but its stability in circulation was ensured. Error coins of 1985 also add a fascinating dimension to this history. Collectors and researchers have documented off-center strikes, double dies, misaligned dies, and missing clad layers that occasionally appear in the series. And though such errors are rare, they can elevate the value of a single dime from just a few cents to hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on the severity and clarity of the error. This makes searching 1985 dimes in change an exciting prospect for those who enjoy the treasure hunt aspect of numismatics beyond the technical details of minting. The 1985 dime also embodies the broader history of American money at a time when the role of coinage itself was beginning to shift. By the mid-1980s, credit cards and electronic payments were starting to become more common, though still far from dominant vending machines, parking meters, payphones, laundromats, and countless everyday transactions relied heavily on dimes, which meant that this small coin, though often overlooked, remained a workhorse of the economy. The cultural significance of the dime should not be underestimated either. The Roosevelt dime has always carried with it the association of Roosevelt's fight against polio and the continuing march of dimes charity. So even in 1985, when a new generation of Americans was growing up, the coin linked them silently to the legacy of the president, who had died 40 years earlier. The mint itself in 1985 was operating in a time of modernization, with coinage machinery becoming more precise and efficient. This helped explain the extremely high production numbers, but also meant that even tiny variations or mistakes became significant to collectors who study them decades later as we explore the values associated with the 1985 dime. It is important to note that circulated examples are typically worth face value, but in uncirculated condition or in proof form. They gain collector value proofs, especially those with deep cameo contrast from San Francisco, are desirable, and certified high-grade examples from grading services such as PCGS or NGC can sell for far more than their face value. Yet beyond market prices lies the true story of the 1985 dime. It is a story of design continuity, of Roosevelt's enduring presence in American coinage, of the evolution of mint technology, and of the way a single 10-cent piece connects every day life to history and heritage. When we hold a 1985 dime, we hold more than money. We hold a link to Roosevelt. We hold a symbol of peace, liberty, and strength. We hold a snapshot of America in the mid-1980s, and we hold a piece of numismatic history that collectors and historians alike can continue to study, appreciate, and pass down for generations. The story of the 1982 Roosevelt dime is far more fascinating than most collectors realize, because on the surface it may appear to be an ordinary dime minted in massive quantities for everyday circulation. But when you step deeper into the layers of history, production changes, minting practices, and collector demand, you find that the 1982 dime holds a crucial place in the modern history of United States coinage and can spark hours of conversation about minting, evolution, errors, rarity, and value. And it begins with understanding why 1982 was such a turning point for American coin production. In the early 1980s, the United States Mint was facing both economic pressure and technological change. Silver had already been removed from dimes. In 1965, and for nearly 2 decades, the Mint had been refining the copper-nickel-clad process that made coins cheaper and more durable than silver. But by 1982, a new challenge appeared. The federal government wanted to reduce costs even further, and part of that strategy was to change how coins were struck and marked. Now, the most important historical fact about the 1982 Roosevelt dime is that it was the first year in modern history when the Philadelphia Mint intentionally left off its mint mark from its dimes. That decision created what collectors today call the 1982 no-P dime, and this error variety has become one of the most sought-after modern coin rarities. But why did it happen, and why does it matter? The Philadelphia Mint had always used no mint mark before 1980, but beginning in 1980, the Mint adopted the practice of adding a small P to coins struck in Philadelphia for the first time. This was meant to distinguish coins from different mints and improve tracking for quality control. However, in 1982, an oversight occurred when one of the working dies was created without the P mint mark, and it was used in production, leading to tens of thousands of dimes struck that year with no mint mark. This was not intentional, but rather a mistake in die preparation, and it instantly created a collectible that remains famous to this day. This mistake represents not just a numismatic curiosity, but also a historical window into how the Mint operated during the transition period of the early 1980s. Imagine the scale of production: millions upon millions of dimes rolling off presses in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, yet one simple oversight: the absence of a single tiny P on the obverse under Roosevelt's portrait transformed some of those coins from pocket change, worth 10 cents, into treasures worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Depending on condition, the 1982 no-P dime is the star of the year, but the history of the 1982 dime goes far beyond just the error, because it connects directly to the broader history of the Roosevelt dime itself, which began in 1946. The Roosevelt dime was created to honor President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who had died the previous year. Roosevelt was beloved not only for his leadership during the Great Depression and World War II, but also for his strong association with the March of Dimes campaign, which helped fight polio. Choosing him for the dime symbolized America's gratitude and was fitting, since his legacy was tied to dimes from the very start. Designed by chief engraver John R. Sinnock, the Roosevelt dime remained virtually unchanged from 1946 through 1982. And this consistency means that small variations, such as the missing mint mark, became all the more dramatic because collectors could instantly identify something unusual. The design itself features the left-facing profile of Roosevelt with the word Liberty. At the left edge of the coin, the motto, "In God We Trust," beneath. His chin, the date, 1982, prominently on the lower right, and just above that space, the location where the mint mark should appear when struck at Philadelphia with the new P tradition, but when absent, it creates the legendary no-P error, the reverse. Design shows a torch in the center, flanked by an olive branch on the left and an oak branch on the right, symbolizing liberty, peace, and strength. The inscriptions, United States of America, one dime, and E pluribus unum, complete the design. The artistry may have remained the same, but the 1982 dime's significance is enhanced by the economic realities of the time. Inflation in the 1970s had reduced the purchasing power of the dime, and coin collecting was entering a new modern era where mint sets, proof sets, and variety collecting were becoming more popular with the American public. The U.S. Mint was under pressure to streamline operations and to strike massive quantities of coins to meet everyday demand. And in 1982, the Mint produced over 519 million dimes at Philadelphia, more than 480 million at Denver, and nearly 3.9 million proof dimes at San Francisco. This massive mintage ensured that ordinary 1982 dimes without errors are common and worth face value even today. But that is exactly why the missing mint mark error is such a standout in the sea of abundance. When you think about rarity, it is not just about how old a coin is, but how few exist. and how much attention collectors give to it. For example, the 1982 no-P dime is considered rare, not because it is centuries old, but because only a fraction of the dimes struck that year lack the mint mark, creating an accidental scarcity that has driven up value over decades. Collectors first noticed the no-P dime in late 1982, when some examples turned up in circulation in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and the surrounding region's. Word spread quickly through coin magazines and local clubs, and demand skyrocketed for what was instantly seen as one of the most dramatic modern mint errors of its time. Soon coin dealers were paying many dollars for a single 10-cent piece, and prices have only climbed since. Depending on grade, an uncirculated 1982 no-P dime can sell for several $100s, while pristine examples graded by professional services can reach values in the thousands. And because this error is easy to identify with the naked eye, it has become one of the most accessible yet exciting discoveries for beginner collectors as well as seasoned numismatists. But the history of the 1982 dime is not limited to the missing P, because it also reflects broader changes in minting technology. During this decade, the mint was investing in improved die-making equipment, automated striking presses, and refining the clad copper-nickel composition, which had been standard since 1965. All of these efforts ensured uniformity and durability, but also created opportunities for small oversights to stand out even more sharply in the collector market. The cultural significance of the dime in 1982 should also be remembered for the average American. The dime was still a vital coin used in vending machines, payphones, parking meters, laundromats, and everyday transactions. Even though inflation meant its buying power had declined, it still played a critical role in commerce. This ubiquity meant that nearly everyone carried dimes daily, and it was in pockets, purses, and cash registers that collectors began to stumble upon the no-P dime, creating a nationwide treasure hunt for a tiny but valuable mistake. By looking at the 1982 dime, we can see how coins are not just money, but history frozen in metal. Each coin tells a story of the time it was minted and the events that surrounded it. The 1982 dime tells us about economic transition, about changes in minting policy, about the rise of variety, collecting, and about how even the smallest oversight can create an object of lasting fascination. Today, numismatists regard the 1982 no-P dime as one of the essential finds of the late 20th century, and it continues to inspire collectors to check their change in hopes of discovering one. While most 1982 dimes remain ordinary, worth only 10 cents. They too are part of the story because they illustrate the scale of production and the reality that out of 500 million coins, only a select few carry the error that made history. When you hold a 1982 dime in your hand, you are not just holding a piece of pocket change. You are holding a chapter in the evolving story of American coinage, a reminder of Roosevelt's enduring legacy, a symbol of minting progress, and a window into a moment when a single missing letter changed everything.